and 7 miles of sand was once the summer destination for Canadian tourists. But now, they're staying away.
Now we're, 35+% discounted on their money, and that's a big hunk. And I know that their economy right now is fairly poor.
They want to keep the Canadians in Canada, and we're trying to get them to come here. But nothing we can do about their tax rate or their exchange.
Frederic Boyer has been vacationing at Old Orchard since he was a child. But with the weak Canadian dollar, getting a little R&R is getting a lot more expensive.
It's expensive, okay? We change, me and my girlfriend changed $400 Canadians, and the bank gave only $200 for the changes. It's so expensive, but for the beach, for the sunshine, for the ocean, that's okay.
So with the number of tourists from north of the border shrinking here at Old Orchard Beach, the town is setting its sights on a new kind of tourist, the American family. Carmine Capone traveled with his family to Maine from New Jersey. He says Old Orchard offers more than just good old family entertainment.
I was going to hit on the way up, and I said, let me hit on the way back. This way I have the bargaining chip to get the kids to behave.
James Harmon of the Chamber of Commerce says while he would like to see more of our neighbors to the north return, he understands how expensive it is to travel, especially with the weak Canadian dollar.
The ratios are different now, whereas it used to be 60, 70% Canadian, 30% American. We're probably 60, 40, 65, 35 now, the higher percentage being Americans.
Harmon says when the Canadians are ready to travel again, Old Orchard will be waiting. In Old Orchard Beach, Maine, Greg McQuade, New England Cable News.
Other money matters tonight. The Federal Reserve decides to leave interest rates unchanged. That decision widely...
Action by the U.S. military will not put an end to terrorism, but it definitely will send a very clear message that the United States will not tolerate terrorism and those who support it.
There are no expendable American targets. There will be no sanctuary for terrorists.
President Clinton calls the U.S. military action in Sudan and Afghanistan a strong message to terrorists that their actions will not be tolerated. But how effective will the U.S. action be?
It's going to be very tense for the next several weeks.
Andrew Winter is with the Institute for Foreign Policy Analysis. He believes that the bombings may deter some terrorists, but it will not be the end of terrorism.
On the one hand, the terrorists are moving about trying to figure out whether they can or respond, and the United States is watching for those moves. On the other hand, I think perhaps the initiative still remains with the United States at this point, because the terrorists can wait, and if they're smart, they'll wait.
Osama bin Laden, an exiled Saudi millionaire, is the leader believed to be behind the terrorist bombings at the U.S. embassies in Africa 2 weeks ago. Bin Laden says that all Americans are targets. He has vowed to continue his crusade against America. But how does the United States respond?
Well, I think the next step is to look, gather intelligence, determine what effect that these raids had on the bin Laden organization, and be prepared to strike in other places or in the same places if necessary.
Most experts believe the U.S. action in Afghanistan and Sudan will only have a short-term impact on terrorist activity, and that as long as there are those willing to sacrifice their lives for what they believe in, terrorism will continue.
We are a wounded world, and as long as you have political animosities and people who are able in some distorted way to think that they are willing to sacrifice their lives, we're just going to have to live with this and absorb it as best we can.
Now, Andrew Winter said today with the global power, as the United States being a global power and with virtually embassies in every single country around the world, that terrorists are certainly to strike again, that we are easy targets. He said today's attacks will only be successful if terrorism comes to an end. Margie?
Thank you very much. Greg McQuade reporting.
This story broke this afternoon with very little warning. President Clinton interrupted his Martha's Vineyard vacation and returned to Washington. New England Cable News reporter Greg Wayland was at the briefing today when it took off.
And natives are being told to move inland from one county. Another county could get the evacuation order later on today. Bonnie could be knocking on the door in North Carolina by tomorrow. Reporter Dean Staley joins us now from Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, with the latest. Dean, good afternoon.
The winds here along the North Carolina beach have increased steadily all day long. The seas have increased dramatically over the last day or so, and everyone up and down the North Carolina coastline is very aware that this is their last full day to prepare before Hurricane Bonnie strikes. By mid-morning, clouds pushed ahead of Hurricane Bonnie were already moving in on the Carolina coast. Surfers here took on storm-driven swells that are now upwards of 8 feet high. Beachgoers took advantage of the proverbial calm before the storm, but everyone here is well aware of the danger lurking just offshore. Bonnie covers an area larger than the state of Texas. She now packs sustained winds upwards of 115 miles per hour. For the last 2 days, Bonnie forced people up and down the coast from Florida to Virginia to stock up on batteries, flashlights, water, and other emergency supplies. Most here remember the damage inflicted by Hurricane Fran just 2 years ago. Toby Hoffman waited too long to run from Fran.
Bridges were flooding, and the rain was just, it was just, I thought I would risk dying more leaving at that point. It was about 3 hours before landfall.
Hoffman won't make that mistake this time.
But this time, definitely, I'm going to pack out.
For more than 200,000 people living along the Outer Banks, that moment has already come.
They just need to take precautions, and they do not need to take a chance to put themselves or the family at risk. And if they've been ordered to evacuate, they need to heed that warning.
Others here are now taking the last final step of boarding up their homes. So evacuations continue here on the Outer Banks. There are voluntary evacuations elsewhere. We are expecting gale force winds this afternoon and on into this evening. Tomorrow we are expecting hurricane force winds along this coastline with landfall predicted sometime tomorrow evening. Reporting live, Dean Staley, ABC News, Wrightsville, North Carolina. Now back to you, Teresa.
All right, Dean, thanks very much. And Fulvio is busy tracking this storm and joins us now with an update from here. Fulvio, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. A wide shot first. Here's Bonnie. We also have another hurricane now, Danielle. So once we get through with Bonnie, we're going to start talking about Danielle, I think, as that's moving through the Atlantic too right now. And here comes Bonnie headed towards the coast of North Carolina, and the warnings are up over North Carolina for this storm system, and also hurricane watches in South Carolina, as well as a tropical storm warning now in the same area in South Carolina. North we go, and we find hurricane watches from the North Carolina-Virginia border right up into southern portions of Delaware now, as those watches and warnings extending north as that storm system continues to move off to the north right now and starting to accelerate. And it looks like it's going to pass southern portions of New England during the day Thursday and then quickly start moving off to the east-northeast out to sea, and by Friday it's really going to be leaving by Friday morning. The most powerful part of the storm is on the eastern side of it, and that's going to stay out to sea as it passes by New England. But still, there will be some rain and wind in southeast portions of New England especially. As far as today goes, cold fronts approaching. Ahead of that, more showers and thunderstorms scattered about during this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Fulvio. It is warm in New England this afternoon, and the heat could result in record electricity demand in New England. So for the second day in a row, a power watch has been declared in the New England states, and consumers, that means, are being urged to conserve electricity. Also, people are picking up the pieces in parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine this afternoon after ferocious thunderstorms yesterday. New England Cable News reporter Greg McQuade is in Londonderry, New Hampshire, with more on the cleanup this afternoon. Hello, Greg.
Good afternoon, Mike. You can see some of the extensive damage left over after